me to start? Everybody is eager to learn chemistry because obviously it's either now or never. Okay, hey everybody, we're live and in stereo. So today I'll be solving like a few MCQs, and I'll also be giving you guys general tips and tricks to go about your MCQ paper. Before I solve these few MCQs that I've put into this paper, I'm just gonna give you guys general thought processes and obviously some tips to help you tomorrow in your chemistry paper, right? So the first and foremost tip that I can give you guys is please have a good night's sleep, right? Sleep is very, very, very important for you guys. Those of you guys who think that you could pull an all-nighter off and in the morning you could sleep after the paper, that's such a bad idea. Do you know why? Because if you pull an all-nighter, the problem would be that in the morning in calculation questions you're gonna suffer a lot, right? Because your brain will not be working properly. So first of all, have a good night's sleep. Okay? Other than having a good night's sleep, you should also have a good breakfast, but try to take sweet things, right? So try to take like, देखो मैं आपको dietitian भी बन के बातें बता रहा हूँ. So try to take like a glass of milkshake, or try to eat something sweet like chocolate or biscuits. Don't take a heavy breakfast, because then there's science behind it, there's biology behind it. I'm not a bio teacher, but as far as we've heard throughout our stages of O levels and A levels, if you guys take a heavy breakfast, what will happen is all the blood in your body will be concentrated in your stomach, right, to basically help you guys churn out that food, right? तो take जो है carbohydrates ले ले, which is basically sweet things, chocolate हो गया, milkshake हो गया, fruit हो गया, because that breaks down really quickly and then that gives energy to your brain. So take like a few biscuits with you, जो है पेपर के दौरान भी take a few biscuits, ठीक है? तो ये तो बात हो गई general बातें, ठीक है? Now how to go about the paper? The thing is that the best way to solve the MCQ paper is, obviously I've discussed it like a gazillion times, it's called an elimination method. You have to not just tick the option that you have a gut feeling about, rather you'll have to eliminate all the wrong answers. Think very quickly कि अच्छा ये answer इसलिए गलत है, इसलिए गलत है, ये इसलिए गलत है, and then you tick the right option, right? And the way you need to do that, the way you need to solve all these 40 MCQs is, first of all, read the MCQs quickly, right? So like for example, I read question number 1, and that was very, very simple, like what is a solid being what is the process called that a solid is being converted into a liquid? So I could just quickly circle melting, right? I don't even have to look at the other options. So do the calculation questions at the end. Calculations questions, jitne bhi, no matter how good you are in calculations, do them at the end, and do these straightforward simple questions. कसम से 100 बच्चे आ गए, और ये कितनी बुरी बात है, मैंने लेट इसीलिए किया था कि बच्चे कम हो ताकि कम सवालों के जवाब देने पड़े. Okay, but other than that, I'm just being ungrateful. Sorry guys, you're all welcome here. ठीक है. So what I was saying is that do the calculation questions at the end, do the straightforward questions first, ठीक है? And आप इसको ना देखें कि आपकी moles बहुत अच्छे हैं, आपकी calculations बहुत अच्छे हैं, regardless of whether you are good at solving performing calculations or not, leave them for the end, ठीक है? Do the questions that you guys नो बेटर, ठीक है? और नो बेटर से मुराद ये भी है कि कैलकुलेशन अगर नो बेटर भी हो उसको फिर भी एंड पे छोड़, ठीक है? एंड देन ऑब्वियसली देन द पैटर्न कम्स कि अच्छा कौन सा टॉपिक आपका स्ट्रांग है, कौन से एमसीक्यूज आपको जिसमें थोड़ा सा भी सोचना पड़े. द एमसीक्यू दैट रिक्वायर्स इवन अ लिटिल बिट ऑफ थिंकिंग, लीव इट, skip it, go forward, and you will understand that by the end of your 40 MCQs, you'll be done with half the paper in like about 10 minutes. If you guys use this methodology, half of the paper will be done in 10 minutes, and that will also boost your confidence, right? So आप लोगों को फ़ायदा क्या होगा कि because when you get the questions right as you're going through the paper, that boosts up your confidence, and then you could try to solve the more complex questions, and you're bound to get the answers right, ठीक है? Sir, repeated आएंगे कितने? Yes, so MCQs are mostly repeated. There is a misconception that, you know, students are saying, sir, will the MCQs be different from the previous time, or will it be the same or whatnot? Let me tell you guys, MCQs are gonna be 97% same. The only things that they will change is maybe like the names. The concepts behind the MCQs are gonna be same. One of the students on my YouTube channel was messaging, sir, what if the MCQs are totally different? No, if you gave the theory paper, you would know that there is not much of a difference in your paper, right? जो paper था वही paper आपके पास आया है. There's just a very, very minimal change in how they ask questions, especially for O-level students. The O-level and IGCSE syllabus has for chemistry, it is now more or less the same, and the way the examiners are now questioning for your O-levels is based on more of a thought process of IGCSE. So now IGCSE and O-levels for chemistry have somewhat become the same, right? तो वो अभी थोड़ा सा same. Sir, we need to see your face. We're gonna do a face reveal at the end. I've shown you my face a gazillion times. Follow me on Instagram, you'll see my face. ठीक है? कितने? Okay, and there's this misconception that okay, questions करते जाएं. What I would suggest is after this session, what you guys need to do is quickly go over your concepts, and if you're done with that, open the questions that you've done wrong, and then you check out the MCQ that is wrong, and then you find out why the following MCQ was wrong. What was the wrong concept that you applied when you got that MCQ wrong? तो जितने MCQs आपके past papers में गलत है, go over them like that, so that'll help you tomorrow in the paper. So last day practice करना चाहिए. That's what I'm saying, Ali. You don't need last day practice, right? Just revise your concept and go over the MCQs that you've done wrong. Don't rote learn the wrong MCQs. What you need to do is you need to just go over them and check them out. Okay, I circled B, but the marking scheme says C. Why did I circle B? What was the wrong concept that I applied? And why is the marking scheme saying that it's C? What is the concept behind that? That is how you should go about things, and then have a good night's sleep. ठीक है? So this is probably the last class that I'm taking for 100 का लिमिट है इसमें भी. ओके, वाह, मैंने Zoom की इतनी बड़ी सब्सक्रिप्शन ली और 100 का लिमिट, वो मेरे ख्याल से प्रोसेस अभी तक नहीं हुआ था. पैसे ज़ाया. ओके, सो आपके पास ये मेरी लास्ट क्लास होगी आपके साथ, एंड आफ्टर दैट ऑन द 15th of June, Sir Abbas and I and a few other conceptual teachers for O-levels and IGCSE, we have Miss Khadija, who is really good in English. She has taken literature, she took literature, and now she's also doing things related to English literature and English language, so she's really good. You guys could check her out too, and from the 15th of June her session will also be starting as well as mine. I know Miss Khadija personally. She's a good for you. I swear she is. She's really good. I see her stories and man, that's mind-boggling, right? If there's a genius in English, it's Ma'am Khadija. Okay. Chalo ji, I feel like we should start solving some questions, and then at the end of this class, I'm going to take your guys' individual queries, ठीक है? But I'll just keep that short. 40 minutes. जो पहले हाथ खड़ा करेगा वो जो है उसको opportunity मिलेगी, ज़ाहिर सी बात है. And even during this session, those of you who have a genuine question, raise your hand, and then I will ask you to speak, and you can ask me the question, ठीक है? Ali has risen his hand. Yes, Ali, do you have any question? Okay, no hand raised. Chalo, let's start, guys. Risen. Ali has raised his hand. Sorry, risen. My English. It's going down the drain day by day. Okay, ji, let's start, guys. Let's start. Solve some calculation questions. I'll be doing that. Chalo, isme added hai. Chalo, guys, let's start. Okay, so the first questions. Oh, we've done question number 4 in the last class. Okay, let's start from question number 5. The table shows data for some particles. There are gaps represented by W, X, Y, and Z. You've been given some particles, which is like argon, and you have like your what's it called? You have like your argon. You have potassium plus, which means that this potassium has lost one electron. You have scandium, and you have sulfur 2 minus, right? So you have the proton number 18, this, and there are some gaps missing. You have the nucleon number, which is missing, this W missing right here, and this X missing right here, and this Z, right? So we have to find this out. I am recording, guys. Okay, so proton number essentially kya hai? Proton number is the total number of protons in the nucleus of an atom, and you could also call it the atomic number. Atomic number is also, so proton number, atomic number, they are the same things, right? And then nucleon number, which is also known as the mass mass number is actually the total number of protons plus neutrons in the nucleus of an atom. Number of neutrons आप कैसे find कर सकते हैं? When you're given the nucleon number, let's take argon for an example. If you've argon and argon की अगर आप proton number देखें, argon is 1840, right? And the nucleon number is 40 because nucleon number is the total number of protons plus neutrons, और जो बड़ा number होता है that's the nucleon number जिसको आप mass number भी कहते हैं. So if the nucleon number is 40 and that is equal to the total number of protons plus neutrons, and you know the total number of protons for argon is 18, right? So 40 equals 18 plus n, and if I were to find the number of neutrons, I would say n is equal to 40 minus 18. That's what we do normally कि बड़े number को छोटे से minus कर दें तो आपके पास number of neutrons आ जाते हैं. But इसके पीछे logic क्या है? Logic behind it is that the nucleon number is the total number of protons plus neutrons, and if you have the total number of protons, you just substitute it right here. You have the nucleon number, subtract the 2, and you're going to get the number of neutrons, right? So for argon, the number of neutrons is going to be 40 minus 18. That gives me 22. So A and B are automatically wrong. W is 22 right here, right? Let's check X out. X is basically talking about the number of electrons, and we have potassium plus, right? Which means that you don't have potassium atom, you have a potassium ion. Which also means that if for a neutral atom of potassium, it must have had 19 protons and 19 electrons. But if it is a K plus ion, that means that it has now lost an electron. Therefore, the total number of electrons now present are going to be 18. Those of you who are weak in this concept, I just recommend making an equation for yourself, which is the total number of protons is 19, so we say plus 19, you have 19 protons. You don't know the total number of electrons, so we say we don't know the total number of electrons, that's X, right? But you know the total charge. What is the total charge? The total charge is plus 1. That's an equation that has formed, right? So X plus 19 equals plus 1. X is equal to 19 उस side पे shift हो जाएगा, which will give you minus 19 plus 1. X is equal to minus 18, and we know the charge on one electron is negative 1, therefore you will have 18 electron. Negative 18 means negative 18 means that you have 18 electrons because each electron has a charge of minus 1. So obviously X 18 और 18 automatically given था. इसको देखने की Y को भी देखने की ज़रूरत नहीं है. 45 दोनों दिए. Z को देख लेते हैं. If you check Z out, sulfur in the periodic table, sulfur is 16, and 16 is the number of protons, and nucleon number is like 32, right? And you have to check out you have to find the number of electrons, okay? And its sulfur is 2 minus, which means that for a neutral atom of sulfur, it must have had 16 protons and 16 electrons. But since it's 2 minus, this means that 2 extra electrons have been gained by sulfur. Therefore, there must be 18 electrons in sulfur 2 minus. So D is the right option. All of you were right. I have to go into a little bit detail, although for some of you it might be boring, but some of you don't understand these concepts pretty well. So I have to go into a lot of detail, okay? So 18 electrons जो हैं वो sulfur. जिनको ये नहीं आती ये calculations, I would recommend making an equation for yourself. So an equation would be, if I were to find the number of electrons, you have proton number, you have 16 protons, which means you have a charge of plus 16. Electron numbers नहीं पता, we have to find that out. That's called Z. And what is the total charge? The total charge is minus 2. So that is my equation. Plus 16 plus Z equals minus 2. Z equals 16 is shifted on the right hand side, you're going to get minus 16 minus 2, Z equals minus 18. We know the charge on one electron is negative 1, so minus 18 would mean 18 electrons. Okay, so you could have done either or. It was pretty easy question. Okay. This question, the next question says, the diagram shows the chromatogram obtained by analysis of a single dye. 3 measurements are shown. How is the RF value of the dye calculated? So you're given the baseline, which is right here, but the drop has been put right here above the baseline. Right now, the problem is that you shouldn't be doing this. Baseline ka maqsad hi yahi hota hai that you need to put the spot on the baseline. But since it has not done that, we will consider the distance traveled by this spot from this middle right here. Idhar से हम इसका डिस्टेंस जो है वो ऑब्जर्व करेंगे, नॉट फ्रॉम द बेस लाइन, बिकॉज आई नेवर पुट द स्पॉट ऑन द बेस लाइन. इफ आई हैड पुट द स्पॉट ऑन द बेस लाइन, then I would, calculate the distance traveled by the component, which is like right here. Then if the spot was here, then I would measure the distance from this line right till the top, right till here where the component has traveled, right? लेकिन चूंकि मैंने spot ही गलत जगह पे डाला है, so obviously then I will have to measure the distance from this area right here. So I take y, and from y I will go right here. This is the distance traveled by the component, right? And RF value calculate करने के लिए क्या करना पड़ता है? It is the ratio of the distance traveled by the component, which is y, to the distance traveled by the solvent front. Now, for this particular dot, for this spot right here, I took this as my baseline, right? क्योंकि baseline नीचे लगा हुआ था, but I put my spot here. So automatically I take this as the baseline, and from the baseline to the solvent front, what is the distance? The distance is y plus x. So obviously I'm gonna say the distance traveled by the solvent front would be x plus y, right? So y divided by x plus y, B is the right option. D is wrong, everybody. The reason, इसलिए तो मैंने आपको बताया, D is wrong because आपने स्पॉट ही गलत जगह पे डाला. अगर ये होता फिर तो बेस लाइन बनाने की कोई ज़रूरत नहीं है, स्पॉट इधर डाल दो और इधर से मेजर करना शुरू कर दो. Like, come on, okay? Sir, I guess it was to confuse that wasn't the baseline, it's the level of the, yeah, so it's basically original level. Okay, that's the original level of solvent. Sorry, it's not the baseline, it's the original level of the solvent. Yeah, so the baseline is again right here. Sorry, my bad. It's the, sorry, even if this was the baseline and you had put the spot here, again you would take the measurement from this part, because I was also thinking, bhai ye to tabahi macha raha hai. Yeah, we should read it correctly. Yes, you should read it correctly. But regardless, the answer is the same. Okay. The fractional distillation apparatus shown is being used to separate a mixture of two liquids. Obviously, my God, please mute yourself. Okay. बच्चे कह रहे हैं join नहीं हो रहा. Join इसलिए नहीं हो रहा क्योंकि 100 का cap है. Although I don't know, I've taken the subscription. वो अब रात को ही देख सकते हैं. First come, first serve. Okay. Okay, so this fractional distillation that's going on between two liquids, and obviously they must be miscible liquids, which means they must be mixing with each other in order for you to separate them through fractional distillation. You're saying a thermometer is missing from the apparatus. You need a thermometer, right? Because you need to check out कौन सी चीज़ किस point पे boil हो रही, कौन सा vapor किस point पे पहुंच रहा, right? So where should the bulb of the thermometer be placed? The bulb should be placed A, B, C, or D. D is absolutely absurd, because why would you need to place D, a bulb in D, right? D has already given you your distillate, right? So D में bulb रखने का तो कोई दुख नहीं बनता. Between A, B, and C, the best place to put the thermometer bulb is gonna be B, and the reason for that is if you place it at A, the problem would be that the vapor will come till this point, but then it will start to move on here and it will start to condense. So A cannot measure the temperature of the vapor quite accurately, right? That's why A is gonna be wrong. So let's eliminate A. And C is wrong, because the reason why C is wrong is because these glass beads also contains vapors of other substances, right? तो और जो substances हैं उसके भी vapors इस glass beads तक आ जाते हैं, which obviously they don't have enough energy, so they condense back, and then जिसकी energy ज़्यादा होगी, जिसने अपना boiling point reach किया होगा, only that will be able to escape these glass beads and enter into this this column where it will be condensed down. ठीक है? So C is wrong. That's why C is wrong, because इसमें और भी vapors होंगे, and B is therefore the correct option, because B is right. B is basically the sweet spot where you could measure the boiling point or the temperature of the vapor, and then that vapor would enter right here. Yes, Hasib, do you have any question? Ask away, man. Fractional distillation is used to separate miscible liquids. Gases को अलग करने के लिए उसको, अगर if you want to separate two gases, ये आपके कोर्स में पहले था, अब हटा दिया है. जैसे आप एयर में से आप gases को separate करना चाहते हैं, so what you do is you first of all liquefy that air, right? So you liquefy that gas. जब liquefy हो जाता है फिर आप fractional distillation कर सकते हैं, right? खाली गैस के कैसे डायरेक्टली कर सकते? नो, खाली गैस के नहीं. नो, what they might have meant by that, whichever teacher told you, what I'm pretty sure what he might have meant by that is कि जो गैस है उसको आप fractional distillation के थ्रू तभी कर सकते हैं when you liquefy it, then you basically can separate it through fractional distillation. वालेकुम अस्सलाम. Sir, please explain that chromatography. See, chromatography वाली बात ये है. Yes, sir. Just give me one sec. Just give me one sec, Arham. Okay. So please explain. Okay, let me explain this again. See, you have original level of solvent right here. It wasn't the baseline. I thought it was the baseline, but it's the original level of the solvent, right? And wherever you put the spot, this is gonna be considered as your baseline. Even if he said that this is the baseline, it wouldn't be considered at it, right? This spot hota hai, that is considered as your baseline. So from the baseline to this point, that is the distance traveled by the component, which is y. ये इधर आ गया, y axis इधर दिखाया हुआ है y. And from the baseline to, from where you put the spot, which is essentially your baseline, considered to be your baseline, from this point till all the way to the top, that is your solvent front. So that is x plus y. So RF value is defined as the distance traveled by the component, which is, or the distance, it is the ratio of the distance traveled by the component or analyte or spot, which is y, to the distance traveled by the solvent front, which is from here to this point, which is x plus y. I hope that made sense. Arham legend is here. बट सॉल्वेंट फ्रंट तो कम्प्लीटली नहीं मेजर किया जाएगा. ये क्या है? ये y है. ये इधर से आपका सॉल्वेंट फ्रंट ये है, दिस line that you've drawn here. So from this point to this point, it's y plus x. क्यों नहीं measure किया जाएगा? It's measured, man. Okay. Moving on. Okay, moving on. I hope that made sense, guys. Okay, 2 decimeter cube of aqueous sodium hydroxide of concentration 5 mole per decimeter cube were required for an experiment. How many moles of sodium hydroxide were needed? You need to find moles. You're given the volume, you're given the concentration. N is equal to CV. Moles is equal to concentration into volume. Concentration is 5, volume is 2. 10 moles obviously is going to be the answer. मतलब मजाक किया हुआ है इधर हमारे साथ, right? And you could also do it like this कि okay, 5 mole जो है वो 1 liter में, which is 1 decimeter cube. So 5 moles are in 1 decimeter cube. And if you have 2 decimeter cube, how many moles would you have? That is x. Cross multiply, x is equal to 5 into 2, that is 10. So both ways you were going to get the answer. Sir, मुझे डर लग रहा है, sir, paper will be easy. Yeah, it'll be easy. I don't know why you guys are making a big deal out of it. Okay. Which equation describes the most suitable reaction from making lead sulfate? Lead sulfate is an insoluble salt. Do you know how I know that? I know that by knowing my, solubility rules. Or solubility rules में हमने पढ़ा था कि all sulfates are soluble except for LMS and Castrobar. LMS और Castrobar में क्या कहता है? Lead, mercury, silver, calcium, strontium and barium. Obviously, lead sulfate is an insoluble salt. Therefore, you have to prepare it through the precipitation method, which means that you have to take 2 soluble salts of lead sulfate. Lead जो है उसका soluble salt lead nitrate होगा. And if you check A, B, C, D out, C is the only option that contains lead nitrate, right? And H2SO4 आप इसमें इस्तेमाल कर दे. So what will happen is, obviously, if I add them to a beaker, lead 2 plus hai, NO3 minus hai, you're gonna get the H plus ion and the SO4 2 minus ion. They're all gonna continuously bombard with each other, but when the lead comes into contact with the sulfate, they're gonna start to precipitate and form an insoluble salt, right? And the reason why A, B and D are wrong, because obviously the problem with A, B and D is A और B का और D का तीनों का problem ये कि they are all insoluble. Lead जो है वो वैसे lead तो H2SO4 के साथ react कर सकता है, but they're not insoluble, sorry, they're gonna be created through excess method, right? ये सारे excess method के examples हैं. Excess method में हम क्या करते हैं? We basically take a salt, जैसे हम करते थे कि for example iron sulfate बनाना है, तो iron sulfate के लिए हम आयरन को एक्सेस में लेते थे और लिमिटिंग रिएक्टेंट जो है H2SO4 डाल दिया तो आयरन सल्फेट बनेगा, एंड देन सम ऑफ द आयरन वुड बी लेफ्ट बिहाइंड दैट यू सेपरेट थ्रू फिल्टरेशन, राइट? तो just give me a second, Ahmed, let me complete, okay, then I'll repeat it for you. Okay, so जब excess method आप इस्तेमाल करते हैं, आप acid limiting amount में डालते हैं, कम amount में डालते हैं, obviously iron या जो भी salt आप बनाना चाहते हैं, iron sulfate बनाना चाहते हैं, so iron लिया, iron carbonate लिया, iron hydroxide लिया, जो भी लिया, ये मैं excess में डालता हूँ. Now the problem is, if this is in excess, obviously at the end some of the iron would be left behind, right? Or some of, let's take this for an example, some of the lead would be left behind, but you are also going to have lead sulfate, which is an insoluble salt. So this lead sulfate will also be forming at the end. Now how do you separate 2 insoluble salts? You won't, right? You can't. Separating 2 insolubles, like lead और lead sulfate को फिर कैसे हटाओगे? Filtration जब करोगे दोनों residue में आएंगे. So that's the problem, right? That's why we use precipitation method to make insoluble salts rather than the excess method. If I repeat myself for some of you guys whose concepts are very weak, जो excess method होता है उसमें आप जो ये iron, जो ये lead है, lead carbonate है, lead hydroxide, we take the metal or the metal carbonate or metal hydroxide in excess, right? And this is limiting. That's why it's called the excess method, क्योंकि जो metal होता है, metal carbonate, metal hydroxide, you take them in excess, and if you take them in excess, at the end of this reaction, obviously if it's an excess reactant, at the end of this reaction you will have some lead hydroxide left, some lead carbonate left, and some lead left, right? But you'll also be forming lead sulfate, lead sulfate, lead sulfate, lead sulfate, and all these lead sulfates are going to be insoluble, and this will also be left at the end. So separating two solids from each other is going to be very, very difficult. That's why the best way to make lead sulfate or an insoluble salt is through a precipitation method. I hope that made sense. Yes, Hasib Bakhsh. Yeah. What are you insane? We're not discussing electrolysis here, man. We're not discussing electrolysis. I'm going to come back to your question. I think you are talking about the picture that was shared in the group. It was absolutely wrong. We're going to come back to that in the end, okay? पता नहीं किस टीचर के बारे में अब मैं ग़ीबत करने वाला हूँ कि भाई ये कैसे पढ़ा रहा है. Okay, whatever. Let's continue. So the table shows the number of atoms in the formula of some compounds. Which row is not correct? Now, which row is not correct? Obviously, you're given the number of atoms and you're given the formula. So we could check that out. It's saying you have one calcium. Yes, you have one calcium. You have one carbon. Yes, you have one carbon. You have three oxygens. Yes, O3 means you have three atoms of oxygen, right? And in the second part, they're saying you have one carbon. No, you actually have two carbons. So B is actually the not correct option. And it's saying you have five hydrogens. No, you have five hydrogens and one is also present here. So in total you have six hydrogens. So six hydrogens or दो carbons. So B is also wrong. C or D देख लें सही हैं बिल्कुल. एक hydrogen, एक oxygen, and then obviously one sodium, and two hydrogens here, two here, four oxygens, one sulfur, obviously one sulfur. Yeah. Okay, Janab. The diagram shows the electrolysis of aqueous copper sulfate. Okay, using copper electrodes. So if you're using copper electrodes, what would happen if I were to write it? Copper sulfate aqueous, you have the copper 2 plus ion, you have the SO4 2 minus ion, you have the H plus ion and the OH minus ion, because it's aqueous copper sulfate. Now what will happen is, because you're using पहले बात तो cathode पे क्या जाएगा, anode पे क्या जाएगा, panic. Positive is the anode and negative is the cathode. So this is the negative terminal, that's the positive terminal. This cathode will have a positive, this anode will have a positive charge all over it. This cathode will have a negative charge all over it. And from our physics, we know that unlike charges, they attract. So between copper 2 plus and H plus ions, which would be attracted towards the cathode? Because copper 2 plus is more reactive than the H plus ion, it has a greater discharge tendency. So copper 2 plus cathode पे जाएगा, it will gain 2 electrons and become copper solid. So at the cathode, what will happen is slowly and gradually a pink solid will start to deposit. So let's suppose इस cathode का mass 50 grams था, तो slowly and gradually कुछ mass इसमें add होता जाएगा copper का. और anode पे क्या होगा? Neither the hydroxide nor the sulfate would discharge at the anode because it's made up of copper. So it's going to compensate for the copper 2 plus ions that are being used. तो copper dissolve हो जाता है, copper 2 plus ions देता है, and it loses 2 electrons. This is the equation at the anode, and that's the equation at the cathode, right? Panic stands for positive is anode, negative terminal is cathode. Now, it's saying which graph shows how the mass of the cathode changes. So obviously the cathode would have a certain mass and then it would increase because the pink solid is being deposited here. Okay, so you have A saying that you had a constant mass. A कह रहे कि 50 ग्राम थे तो 50 ग्राम ही रहेंगे. That's wrong. The mass of the cathode should slowly and gradually increase. B is saying that the mass of the cathode is decreasing. That's also wrong. C seems to be right? That the mass of the cathode is increasing, but it has said that the initial mass of the cathode is 0. How is that possible? The initial mass of the cathode cannot be 0. इस cathode का जो आपने लगाया हुआ है, इसका कोई ना कोई तो mass होगा, right? So it's not gonna be 0. It will have a certain mass which is shown right here. तो ये 50 ग्राम का कोई certain mass था और ये फिर आहिस्ता increase होता गया. So D is the right option, Reno. 16 says sulfur okay, those of you who are spelling sulfur like SULPHUR, don't spell it like that, because obviously now IUPAC ने change किए, जो आपके teachers भी करें गलत करें, ये पुराना बहुत पुराना MCQ है, किसने मुझे भेजा था, it's SULFUR now, not SULPHUR. okay, अब F इस्तेमाल होता है, so don't spell it like PH. okay, it's saying which element has been oxidized. So to check out which element has been oxidized, we have to write the oxidation states of all of them. So oxygen, we know that oxygen is always going to be -2. Sulfur is obviously, we have to find sulfur out, right? So sulfur ko maine X keh diya, I don't know what sulfur is. Oxygen is -2, but since you have two of those, you times it by 2, and the overall oxidation state of any compound is going to be 0. So X minus 4 equals 0. X is equal to +4. Sulfur is actually +4 right here. You need to be able to calculate these things. और जो लोग डायरेक्ट करना चाहते हैं, डायरेक्ट का भी एक तरीका है, बड़ा आसान तरीका है. वो क्या है कि because oxygen is -2, right? The oxidation state of oxygen is -2 because it makes an ion of -2, right? तो अगर -2 इसका oxidation state है, you have two of those, so in total you have a -4 you have a -4 charge right here if you want to find sulfur. तो अगर ये -4 होगा, the overall oxidation state of any compound should be 0. तो -4 को किसके साथ ऐड करूं कि 0 आ जाए, +4 के साथ. तो डायरेक्ट भी हो सकता है, और आप इसको x कंसिडर कर दें और ऐसे कर दें, दोनों तरीके हो सकते हैं, राइट? नाउ bromine, it's in its pure elemental form. Br2 is the form that is found in the universe. It has no charge, so the oxidation state would be 0. For pure elements is 0, right? Hydrogen is always +1, oxygen is -2. I don't even have to calculate it. Hydrogen here is +1, oxygen is -2. Sulfur, I need to find out sulfur. So I can call this X, ye mera X hai. Hydrogen is +1, but since there are two of those, you times it by 2, so +1 times 2. And oxygen is -2. Please mute yourself. Okay. Oxygen is -2, but since you have 4 of those, you times it by 4 for calculation purposes only, right? To calculate S out. वैसे तो remember guys, आप लोगों की बहुत बड़ी misconception ये है कि चूंकि oxygen का oxidation state -2 है, 4 है, तो अब oxidation state -8 हो गए. No, the oxidation state will remain -2 just for calculation purposes. In order for you to calculate sulfur, you have to take into account all the charges, right? So ये +2 आ जाएगा, ये -8 आ जाएगा. So +2 - 8 is -6. X is equal to X minus 6 is equal to 0. X is equal to +6. So the oxidation of sulfur right here is gonna be +6. Sereno. HBr mein hydrogen is +1, Br is in group 7, it's gonna be -1, right? Now, which element has been oxidized? Everybody is saying D. Let's check it out. Sulfur, agar main dekh लूं, it's going from +4 to +6, which means there's an increase in oxidation state from +4 to +6. Therefore, it's oxidation, right? So yes, sulfur has been oxidized. Agar oxygen की बात मैं करूं, तो oxygen is -2 here, -2 on the right, -2 on the right. There is no change in the oxidation state of oxygen, right? Hydrogen की बात करूं, hydrogen is +1 right here, and it's +1 on the right hand side. There is no change in the oxidation state of hydrogen. And bromine की बात करूं, bromine is going from 0 to -1. There's a decrease in oxidation state of bromine, therefore it's reduction. So bromine is undergoing reduction. Okay. Moving on, question 17 says the energy diagram of reaction between sodium hydroxide and hydrochloric acid is shown. What can be deduced from the diagram? So what you can deduce from the diagram, obviously diagram से आप एक ही चीज deduce कर सकते हो, because you have reactants here and you have products here. The products have a lower energy than the reactants, which actually means that the reactants were at a higher energy level, products are at a lower energy level. So in order for the reactants to go from a higher energy level and make products of lower energy, there must be energy that has been released to the surroundings. Energy must have been released to the surroundings. इसीलिए तो reactants की energy ज़्यादा थी और products की कम हो गई. जो extra energy थी reactants की products से, वो release हो गई in the surroundings. That's what I can deduce from the graph. And the negative sign is an indication कि yes sir, जो reactants की extra energy थी वो release हो गई surroundings के, और अब products बने which are at a lower energy level. So it's saying heat is needed needed to start the reaction. There is nothing that can confirm that heat is needed to start any the following reaction. For all I care, heat की ज़रूरत ही नहीं पड़ती है इसमें, right? तो इससे तो मैं ग्राफ से तो ये बिल्कुल नहीं बता सकता. A is wrong. B says the products contain less energy than the reactants. Yes, if the products contain less energy than the reactants, that means कि जो reactants की energy थी वो release होगी surroundings में, तो ये एक exothermic reaction है. So B is actually the right option. C कह रहे the reaction is rapid. I can't deduce anything about that. Spontaneity आप A levels में पढ़ते हैं. The hydroxide ions have more energy than the H plus ion. They are at the same energy level. अगर ये 100 है तो they are both at the same energy level. So D is also wrong, and I couldn't deduce anything else, right, except for B. ठीक है. 18 says the diagram represents a chemical reaction carried out both with a catalyst and without. Okay, somebody has a question. Yes, Talha. Yes. Yeah, man. True. Yes, sir. Just need to confirm that. Okay, yes. So in exothermic, heat is released, and in endothermic, heat is absorbed from the surroundings. Yeah. So it's saying carried out with a catalyst and without a catalyst. What is the enthalpy change for a catalyzed reaction? So this is the catalyzed reaction which is shown with this dotted line right here. This is the catalyzed reaction. And enthalpy change for the uncatalyzed reaction and the catalyzed reaction is going to be the same, right? Enthalpy change हम कैसे calculate करते हैं? You have the products right here. You take the final energy and less it from the initial energy, right? So final energy क्या है? 50. Initial energy कितनी थी? 100. So final minus initial, we are gonna get minus 50 kilojoules per mole. So B is actually the right answer. And even if you wanted to, be a little more सब अपने इंग्लिश एक्सेंट का फ्लैक्स है, कोई इंग्लिश एक्सेंट का नहीं, उस बेचारे का इंग्लिश एक्सेंट ही ऐसे होगा. ओके, सो इवन इफ यू हैड टू गो थ्रू द लॉजिकल वे, अगर आप इसको प्रॉपरली कैलकुलेट भी करना चाहते तो आप कर सकते थे. एंथैल्पी चेंज क्या होती है? बॉन्ड्स ब्रोकन माइनस बॉन्ड फॉर्म. बॉन्ड्स ब्रोकन किधर तक हो गए? राइट हियर इफ आई वर टू हाईलाइट द बॉन्ड्स ब्रोकन, इधर से लेके इधर तक बॉन्ड्स टूट गए हैं और इधर से इधर तक बॉन्ड्स जो हैं वो फॉर्म हो गए. अगर आप ये दोनों एनर्जी का डिफरेंस भी लेते हैं आपके पास सेम आंसर आएगा, बिकॉज इट्स गोइंग फ्रॉम 100. इफ आई चेक दिस आउट, दिस इज 175 राइट हियर, राइट? तो बॉन्ड किधर से किधर तक टूटे? 100 से लेके 175 तक टूट गए, राइट? सो द एनर्जी टेकन इन ड्यूरिंग बॉन्ड ब्रेकिंग इज प्लस 75 किलो जूल्स पर मोल. एंड रिलीज कितनी हुई है? राइट हियर इधर से लेके आपके पास प्रोडक्ट्स तक कितनी रिलीज हुई? 175 से लेके 50 तक गई है. सो 175 माइनस 50 यू गेट 125. तो 125 एनर्जी जो है वो रिलीज हुई. बिकॉज इट्स रिलीज आई पुट अ नेगेटिव साइन. सो डेल्टा एच इज इक्वल टू 75 माइनस 125. यू आर अगेन गोना एंड अप विद नेगेटिव 50. सो दोनों तरीके कर सकते थे. दूसरा तरीका करेंगे, टाइम ही ज़ाया करेंगे. पहला इज द वे टू गो अबाउट इट, राइट? Okay, the equation for the reaction between sodium carbonate and excess dilute hydrochloric acid is shown. When 26.5 grams of sodium carbonate reacts with excess dilute hydrochloric acid, what is the maximum what is the maximum volume of carbon dioxide produced? You're given the mass of sodium carbonate. So mass, the first step, stoichiometrically, first step क्या होता है? First step is always convert to moles. Second step is go from the moles of the known substance to the moles to the substance that you want to find. तो carbon dioxide हम find करना चाहते हैं तो मोल्स ऑफ सोडियम कार्बोनेट से मोल्स ऑफ कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड तक जाएं और फिर मोल्स ऑफ कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड से वॉल्यूम ऑफ कार्बन डाइऑक्साइड पे चल जाए. ये हम इक्वेशन से करते हैं. ये हम फार्मूला या रेशियो मेथड या क्रॉस मल्टीप्लिकेशन या यूनिटरी मेथड से भी कर सकते हैं और ये भी हम तीनों तरीकों से कर सकते हैं, राइट? सो व्हाट इज द फार्मूला फ्रॉम गोइंग टू मास, फ्रॉम मास टू मोल्स? वी से मास इक्वल्स मोल टाइम्स मोलर मास. मास जो है वो मेरे पास गिवन है विच इज़ 26.5. मोल्स जो हैं आई नीड टू फाइंड देम आउट. एंड मोलर मास फॉर सोडियम कार्बोनेट, कैन एनीबडी टेल मी व्हाट द मोलर मास इज? Can anybody tell me? It's going to be 23 times 2 plus 16 times 3 and carbon is 12 plus 12. 106. Okay, so 106. So mole is equal to 26.5. ये सारा आपने MCQs के लिए ये सारा आपने कैलकुलेटर पे करना है. 26.5 divided by 106. Unless you are weak at math, then you have to do all these steps. So you'll get the number of moles from this place. What are the number of moles? Can anybody help me with that? I think it's 0.25. 0.25 आएंगे. I feel like, yeah, 0.25, yeah. So 1 mole of sodium carbonate gives you 1 mole of carbon dioxide. So if you have 0.25 moles of sodium carbonate, obviously you're going to get 0.25 moles of carbon dioxide, right? And once you have moles of carbon dioxide, you can convert it into volume. V is equal to N times 24. Volume equals moles times 24, which is going to be 2.25 into 24. I feel like that gives me 6 decimeter cube. Yes, sir. So 6 dm cube. A is the right option. तो ऐसे A इधर नहीं लिखा हुआ, yeah, here A is the right option. Okay. A volumetric pipette is used to measure 25 centimeter cube of this much. देखें आपको volume दिया है, concentration दिया, automatically you could calculate the moles from it. But keep in mind that the concentration is in decimeter cube and the volume is in centimeter cube. तो सबसे पहले आप centimeter cube को decimeter cube में convert करें by dividing it with 1000. And if your math is very very weak, you could say okay, 1 decimeter cube 1 लीटर में 1000 centimeter cube होते हैं. तो अगर मेरे पास 25 centimeter cube होंगे तो कितने लीटर होंगे? That's gonna be x is equal to 25 over 1000. What do we get? 25 over 1000? 0 0, and then you get 0.025. so these are the moles, or this is the volume in decimeter cube of aqueous sodium hydroxide. And if I were to find the moles of it, I could find the moles is equal to N is equal to CV. Concentration is 2, volume is 0.025. so moles of sodium hydroxide आ जाएंगे मेरे पास. कितने आ गए? Moles of sodium hydroxide 0.05. Are you sure? 0.05. Okay, thank you very much. So 0.05 moles of sodium hydroxide again. Obviously मेरे से क्या पूछ रहा है? Concentration of dilute sulfuric acid. Concentration के लिए volume दिया है. Concentration क्या होता है? Mole over volume. Concentration is mole per volume, right? इधर भी आपको देखो formula भी दिया, mole per decimeter cube, which means mole over volume. अब आपने moles of dilute sulfuric acid find करने. And how do you do that? You have the moles of aqueous sodium hydroxide, and from the moles of aqueous sodium hydroxide, you have to find the moles of dilute sulfuric acid, and you have to use the equation for that. And what is the equation saying? That 2 moles of sodium hydroxide reacts with 1 mole of sulfuric acid. So if you have 0.05 moles, how many moles of sulfuric acid would have been reacting? 0.05 divided by 2. 0.025 आ जाएगा इससे. 0.05 divided by 2, anybody? What do we get? 0.05 divided by 2, I think we get 0.025. Okay, and then if we get 0.025, you've gotten the moles of sulfuric acid, और आपके पास volume जो है वो 50 centimeter cube दिया, और लेकिन आंसर जो है decimeter cube में मांगे, तो इसको भी आप decimeter cube में convert करें. 50 over 1000. What do we get? 0 0 कट गया, 0 0, so you get 0.05. so concentration अब आपने find करनी, N is equal to CV. concentration find करनी, mole over volume करें. mole आपने find किया 0.025, volume जो है 0.05 है. you're gonna get the answer. What is the answer? Part 1 is the answer. A is the answer. Okay, A is the answer. Pro tip, do not do the mole questions in the first attempt. आराम से end पर करना. मैं भी यही शुरू में कह चुका हूँ, तो अगर आप शुरू में आते आपको पता लग जाता. मैं मोल्स ही करूँगा. ये रिपीट कर दूँ? ओके, देखिए. For titration, if you guys ask me to repeat questions again and again, then I feel like we're going to be done with a very few questions, right? But I hope I can contribute to your concepts, right? Let me just explain it again. देखिए, whenever you have like a titration reaction, what we do is titration के लिए steps बना लें. First of all, find the moles of the known substance, then find the moles of the unknown substance, right? From the moles of the known substance, आपके पास titration में concentration of the known substance होती है. Because like if you use titration, आपके पास volume of neutralization भी आ जाते हैं जो इसमें दिया हुआ है, which is like 25 centimeter cube right here. ठीक है, और आपके पास जो है जो आपके पास concentration of sodium hydroxide दी हुई है वो भी आपके पास. तो concentration भी है, volume भी है. you could easily find the moles of sodium hydroxide. And when you find the moles of sodium hydroxide, because you have to find the concentration of the unknown substance. concentration क्या होती है? mole over volume. तो आपको substance का mole भी चाहिए, जो unknown substance है उसके moles भी चाहिए, और उसका volume भी चाहिए. A volume of the unknown substance has already been given right here, which is 50 centimeter cube, right? But the moles have not been given, and you can calculate the moles through simple stoichiometry. आपके पास 25 centimeter cube और 2 mole per decimeter cube है. इससे moles of sodium hydroxide आ जाएंगे. N is equal to CV. And once you have the moles of sodium hydroxide, you could use this equation to find the moles of sulfuric acid. And then when you have the moles of sulfuric acid divided by the volume, but this should be in decimeter cube, you're gonna get the concentration of sulfuric acid. I hope that made sense, man. But if it didn't, then your concept is a little weak. You have to rewatch this video. Okay. Okay, moving on. Question 4 says I'll just solve like 2-3 more questions and then I'll take your queries. Okay? Which diagram shows the arrangement of particles inside a balloon containing a mixture? I'm so busy literally guys, but I had to take out the time because Sir Abbas जो हैं वो मुझे कह रहे थे, ताने दे रहे थे कि सर आप नहीं करते, तो मैंने कहा चलें. Shad Rahman is saying C, let's see. So which diagram shows the arrangement of particles blah blah blah? A mixture of nitrogen and oxygen. Nitrogen is represented by this dot right here and oxygen is represented with this hollow circle. So nitrogen is obviously N2, it is a diatomic molecule, and oxygen is also O2, right? So if I were to make nitrogen out, there should be two small dots together, two small circles which are filled, and oxygen atom O2 अगर मैं बनाना चाहूँ तो एक O ये और एक O ये, right? These hollow circles are representing an atom of O, right? So ये N2 की representation है, ये O2 की representation है. And if I check this out, A तो बिल्कुल गलत है, इसने तो N और O को बिल्कुल separately किया, but we know they exist as a diatomic molecules. B जो है, B में ज़रा आते हैं, B की बात करते हैं. D क्यों गलत है? D में तो एक नाइट्रोजन को एक ऑक्सीजन को, ये तो NO बनाया हुआ है. D is not N2 and O2, it's NO. And they are saying in the question it's a mixture of nitrogen and oxygen. So D भी गलत है. Between B and C, which one will be right? Obviously the ones who know about the random motion, Brownian motion ने कहा था, वैसे Brownian motion को आपके कोर्स से हटा दिया गया, लेकिन Brownian, ये पुराना MCQ है ना, लेकिन Brownian motion क्या कहता है कि particles are continuously in tiny particles, they are continuously in a zigzag motion, in a random motion. So C is basically an indication of the random motion rather than B, therefore C is the right option. The ion Q2 plus has 3 complete it's a specimen. Yeah, so there are questions from all across and I've compiled like papers, right? So बस मैं करते जा रहा हूँ. Okay, the ion Q2 plus has 3 complete shells of electrons. What is Q? Now, if it has 3 complete shells of electrons, first of all, check this out. It has a 2 plus charge. Oxygen and sulfur are non-metals. They tend to gain electrons rather than losing. So C and D are automatically wrong. That's how easy your chemistry is. Literally, दो options तो automatically गलत होती हैं, ठीक है? बाकी A और B में option रह गया. So A is calcium. A जो है वो कह रहे calcium 2 plus है और magnesium 2 plus है. अब मुझे बताएं कि calcium 2 plus में 3 shells होते हैं कि magnesium 2 plus में होते हैं. You would only know that if you check the periodic table out. Magnesium is 1224 if I'm not wrong, and calcium is 2040. तो अगर मैग्नीशियम 2 इलेक्ट्रॉन्स लूज करे, इट विल हैव 10 इलेक्ट्रॉन्स, एंड इफ कैल्शियम लूजेस 2 इलेक्ट्रॉन्स, इट विल हैव 18 इलेक्ट्रॉन्स लेफ्ट, राइट? तो अगर 2 प्लस और 2 प्लस होते हैं, सो इट हैड 12 फॉर अ न्यूट्रल एटम ऑफ मैग्नीशियम, इट हैड 12 प्रोटॉन्स एंड 12 इलेक्ट्रॉन्स, बट देयर इज नाउ अ 2 प्लस चार्ज व्हिच मींस के 2 इलेक्ट्रॉन्स गए हैं. फॉर अ न्यूट्रल एटम ऑफ कैल्शियम, इट हैड 20 प्रोटॉन्स एंड 20 इलेक्ट्रॉन्स. दैट्स व्हाई देयर वाज नो चार्ज, बट सिंस 2 electrons have left, since 2 electrons are lost, therefore the total number of electrons are 18. So now check this out. If I write the electronic configuration, इसके लिए क्या होगी? The first shell will hold up to a maximum of 2 electrons, and the second shell holds up to a maximum of 8 electrons. So there are only how many shells? 1, 2. There are 2 shells for magnesium, therefore B is automatically wrong and A is the right option. Why? Because 18 electrons पहले में 2, दूसरे में 8, तीसरे में 8, and it has 3 complete shells of. वैसे complete दोनों हैं, लेकिन एक में 2 complete हैं और एक में 3, right? I'm not going to do these questions. अच्छा, ये क्वेश्चन 7 मैंने इतनी दफ़ा देखा है आपके उसमें ग्रुप में, पता नहीं बच्चों को क्यों नहीं आ रहा. It's saying 2 isotopes of chlorine are chlorine 35 and chlorine 37. We all know that. Using these isotopes, how many different relative molecular masses are possible for the compound with the... Okay, so you're given this compound और वो कह रहे हैं कि कितने different relative molecular masses हो सकते हैं, right? If you calculate the mass of this compound, how many different masses will you obtain? Now, carbon and hydrogen, they will remain constant, right? Because carbon 12 है और you times it by 2, and hydrogen 1 है and you times it by 3. ये तो same रहेंगे. फर्क किस में आएगा? क्लोरीन के atoms में. You have 3 chlorine atoms that are bonded here, right? Now these 3 chlorine atoms can all be of chlorine 35. They can all be of chlorine 35. That will give you a different relative molecular mass of this entire compound. They can all be of chlorine 37. This will give you a different relative molecular mass. One can be of 35 and 2 can be of 37. ये भी हो सकता है, और ये भी हो सकता है कि दोनों 35 के हों और एक जो है वो 37 का हो. Now some of you guys are making, and this is all it, right? So C is the right option. You get four different relative molecular masses. Now some of you are saying कि सर, किस बच्चे ने मुझे मैसेज किया, उसने कहा सर आपने कहा कि एक 35 का होता है और दो 37 के होते हैं. अगर मैं कहूँ कि एक 37 का होता है, अगर सर मैं कहूँ कि one is 37 and the other two are 35 and 35, I said बेटा ये और ये में क्या फ़र्क है, या ये करो या ये करो, दोनों में क्या फ़र्क है, right? Is this the specimen paper? There are multiple MCQs, man. They are collected from different places. ठीक है? So that's why C is the right option, Reno. अच्छा वैसे A करने की ज़रूरत है, कर भी लेता हूँ. बच्चे ने कहा सर प्लीज़ A करें. Yes. Sorry. Yeah, sure, I can explain this again, but you need to have a clear concept of how to calculate relative molecular masses, right? So you have free chlorine atoms which are bonded with this molecule, right? And the only way you're going to end up with different masses is that you have these different isotopes that are used. तो हो सकता है कि ये 3 chlorine atoms जो bonded हैं, ये तीनों chlorine 35 के. So that's going to give you a different relative molecular mass. 35 plus 35 plus 35, that gives me what? 105. और अगर मैं 37, अगर ये भी हो सकता था, दे आर जस्ट पॉसिबिलिटीज, राइट? ये भी हो सकता था कि ये तीनों क्लोरीन एटम्स आर बिलोंग टू क्लोरीन 37, तो इन तीनों से आपके पास एक डिफरेंट रिलेटिव मोलेकुलर मास आता. ये भी हो सकता था कि एक क्लोरीन 35 है और दो क्लोरीन 37 है, तो इससे भी एक डिफरेंट रिलेटिव मोलेकुलर मास आता. और ये भी हो सकता था कि दो क्लोरीन 35 थे और एक क्लोरीन 37. दीज आर ऑल द पॉसिबिलिटीज. यू जस्ट हैव टू ले आउट ऑल द पॉसिबिलिटीज फॉर योर सेल्फ विच आर गोना गिव यू डिफरेंट रिलेटिव मोलेकुलर मास. इसके अलावा आप कोई भी पॉसिबिलिटी देके वो इसमें फॉल करेगी. लाइक इफ आई से कि अगर सर ये भी तो हो सकता है कि एक 37 और दो 35 हो, इसको ऐसे अरेंजमेंट इसकी कर दें बजाय ये कि आप ऐसे करें, लेकिन मास तो सेम आएगा ना. दो क्लोरीन 35 पहले आए और एक 37 बाद में, या एक 37 पहले और दो 35 बाद में. इफ यू कैलकुलेट देयर मासेस दे आर गोना बी द सेम. या आई होप दैट मेड सेंस. मिनिमम कितना स्कोर करना चाहिए? वाई सी? बिकॉज 1 2 3 4 ऑप्शंस. 39, 38 minimum. Okay. Man, I said these two are the same. What are you guys doing, man? I said this chlorine 37, 35, 35 and this 35, 35, 37. These two are the same things. They're going to give you the same relative molecular. They're saying different thing. ये चारों आपस में different है. Just to explain it further, I said if you rearrange them, they're going to give you the same relative molecular masses. 35 plus 35 plus 37 करें या 37 plus 35 plus 35 करें, एक ही बात बनती है. Okay? I hope that made sense. Okay, the symbol of two ions are given. Let me just do that. बच्चे ने कहा सर ये भी कर लें. Okay, कर लेते हैं. The fluoride ion contains, okay, पहले इसकी वो ions की बात करें, electrons, protons की बात करें, तो let me just calculate that. Fluoride ion has 9 protons. Proton number don't change, right? So 9 protons and 11 protons of sodium. और क्यों नहीं करते, कैसे नहीं करते, वो सारी explanation है, but they are obviously for the students जो live classes में थे. अब आप लोगों के साथ मैं past paper कर रहा हूँ ना. I'm expecting you guys know that the proton number, they don't change because there is no gain and loss of protons. There is only gain and loss of electrons. Okay. So if fluoride ion has a negative charge, that means it has one extra electron. So for a neutral atom of F, if it was a neutral atom, then it would have 9 protons and 9 electrons. जिनको confusion होती तो आप ऐसे कर लें, आप अपने साथ confirm करके, okay, for a neutral atom of F, there must have been 9 protons and 9 electrons. अब एक minus इसका मतलब है एक electron ज़्यादा आ गया, तो you have 10 electrons in total. And if I were to calculate the number of neutrons, बड़े से छोटे को minus कर दें, जैसे आपको पढ़ाया जाता है, right? कि take the bigger number and subtract it from the smaller. But this concept behind of it, this is the nucleon number, which is the number of the total number of protons plus neutrons, and proton number are 9, so substitute the 9 here, and n is equal to 19 minus 9. इसीलिए हम ये subtraction करते, तो 10 neutrons हैं. और इस केस में 21 minus 11, you get 10 neutrons and 11, and it has a 1 plus charge, which means for a neutral atom it must have had 11 protons and 11 electrons, but since it's 1 plus, it means कि एक electron lose कर गया, so you have 10 electrons. Okay, so the number of electrons are the same. So fluoride ion contains more electrons than the sodium ion? No, they are the same, 10 electrons. The sodium ion contains more neutrons than the fluoride ion? No, they are the same, दोनों 10 है, right? The two ions, sir, पेड़ जानवर महंगा, what are you on about, man? Okay. The two ions contain the same number of electrons as each other? Yes, they do. Both contains 10 electrons, right? The two ions contain the same number of protons as each other? No, one has 9 proton and one has 11 proton. D is also wrong. Okay. This is how you should go about your paper, to be honest. Okay. Yes, Ahmed 714, you may ask the question. Yeah. So it's so lose कर जाएंगे उसके बाद इसलिए बता रहे हैं because it's saying the iron Q2 plus. Yeah, makes sense. He has already stated that he's talking about the iron. He's not talking about the atom. Yeah, तो obviously lose जब कर जाएंगे उसके बाद उसके number of electrons की बात कर रहे हैं, right? Number of shells की. Okay. Carbon electrodes, which means graphite, are used to electrolyze aqueous copper sulfate. Let's do that, right? So what is going to happen? You have the anode, you have the cathode. The anode will have the positive terminal is the anode, negative, not the positive terminal, the electrode attached to the positive terminal is the anode, and obviously that's my cathode. Negative is cathode, positive is anode, right? So this will have a positive charge all over it, this will have a negative charge all over it. You have copper sulfate, which means you have copper 2 plus ions, SO4 2 minus ions, the H plus ion, and the OH minus ion, right? So what's going to happen is the copper 2 plus will discharge at the cathode, it'll gain 2 electrons. Cathode कहता है you lack 2 electrons, मैं आपको electron देता हूँ, मैं negative charge हूँ, इधर आओ बेटा, come here, I'm going to give you the 2 electrons, and you could become neutral, and you could become copper solid, which is a pink solid, and this will start to deposit at the cathode, right? And what will happen at the anode, because it's made up of graphite, अगर तो ये copper का होता तो होता क्या कि ये copper dissolve हो जाता और आपके पास copper would dissolve to give you copper 2 plus plus 2 electron. जिनको ये बातें समझ नहीं आती, अब concept का वक्त गुजर चुका है. अब ये याद रखें कि अगर copper के electrodes, देखो हमें रट्टा लगवाना भी आता है, अगर copper के electrodes होते हैं तो जो cathode पे होगा उसका opposite anode पे होगा. अब आप ऐसे याद कर लें. Those of you who have weak concepts, you could just rote learn these things now because there's no other way, right? You guys have to pass it either by hook or by crook. Okay? So because they are graphite electrodes, a simple reaction would take place between the hydroxide and the sulfate ion. Which would win the race? Obviously the hydroxide wins the race. 4 hydroxide ions go together, gives you 2 water and 1 oxygen, and 4 electrons are lost. Each hydroxide loses 1 electron. So that is what's gonna, so a colorless gas, oxygen is a colorless gas which will form at the anode. And what will happen to the color of the solution? The blue color of the solution would fade away because obviously the blue color was because of the copper 2 plus ions, and because they are being deposited, the blue solution is gonna fade away. So what is happening at the anode? A colorless gas, which is oxygen, that is forming. C and D are wrong. The blue color obviously fades away. And what is happening at the cathode? A pink solid is forming. A is the right option. One more MCQ, guys, and then I'll take your questions. Okay, electrolysis is used to plate a metal coin with silver. The coin is used to a metal coin with silver. Obviously, if you want to electroplate a metal coin with silver, you have to attach the coin to the cathode. और इसमें कंफ्यूज होने की वैसे कोई बात नहीं है. And silver should be right here with on the anode, right? And obviously you should have an electrolyte of silver, which is basically a soluble compound of silver. और silver का एक soluble salt आपने लेना है या एक soluble compound लेना है. And we know that all nitrates are soluble, so let's take silver nitrate, Ag plus and NO3 minus. Now some of you guys get confused कि anode पे लगाएं कि cathode पे लगाएं. मेरी एक बहुत सिंपल सी बात सुने, मतलब it's physics and it's common sense, right? If you put it at the anode, only then it will, if you put it at the cathode is negatively charged, right? So this will have a negative charge and this will attract this positive charge towards it, and therefore the Ag plus ion would start to deposit, because unlike charges attract, Ag plus ion will gain electron at the cathode and a silver will start to deposit here. लेकिन अगर आप ये anode पे लगाते हैं ये coin, और ये जो silver का electrode है ये आप cathode पे लगाते हो, मसला क्या होगा कि ये जो Ag plus है ये cathode पे deposit होगा, because the anode is positively charged. So the silver coin will start to repel this Ag plus, because like charges they repel. So the only way you could electroplate anything, any metal or any alloy, is if you put it at the cathode, because at the cathode will have the negative charge and the positive ion of the metal will start to deposit there. So what will happen at the cathode is the Ag plus ion deposit, Ag plus ion gains an electron to become silver, Ag solid deposit हो जाएगा. And ये जो चूंकि ये electrode जो है, जो anode है, वो आपके पास metal से बना हुआ है, so this will start to compensate for it and this will start to dissolve. So what will happen at the anode is the Ag would dissolve to give you Ag plus and 1 electron, right? Now it's saying which row is correct. I hadn't looked at the question, so now let's see what is the question asking us. It's saying coin को किधर लगाना चाहिए? Obviously coin should be at the cathode. And what should be the electrolyte? Now Ag silver aqueous दिया, AgNO3 aqueous दिया. अब सर सुलेमान ने तो कहा है कि सर AgNO3 जो भी aqueous substance हो आप उसको इस्तेमाल इस्तेमाल कर सकते हो. Obviously aqueous means that it's soluble in water, it is dissociated into its ions and it can conduct electricity because you can use it as an electrolyte. And the reason why you can use it as an electrolyte is because it has free moving ions. An electrolyte is any solution that has free moving ions. अब आप पूछ सकते हो मेरे से, सर ये भी aqueous है, ये भी aqueous है, तो आपने नाइट्रेट क्यों इस्तेमाल किया, आपने AgCl क्यों इस्तेमाल नहीं किया? क्योंकि आपको कंफ्यूज करने के लिए इसके साथ aqueous लिखा है, AgCl is insoluble. हालांकि ये नहीं करना चाहिए था इनको. All group 7 salts are soluble except for LMS, lead, mercury and silver. तो ये करना नहीं चाहिए था. This is very wrong on their part that they have played a psychological game with you guys, but it's very very simple. Aqueous से confuse नहीं होता, ये actually aqueous नहीं हो सकता, ये solid का solid ही रहेगा, right? Last MCQ, or let's check some calculation MCQs if there are some. Let me see if I can find like a calculation MCQ for you guys. Okay. Which mass of oxygen gas combines exactly with sulfur to form exactly with 16 grams of sulfur? Now see, you're given the mass of sulfur and you're asked about the mass of oxygen. Now, the only way you could determine the mass of sulfur from the mass of oxygen from the mass of sulfur is if you had something that is connecting the two things together. And the thing that is connecting sulfur to oxygen is a balanced equation, right? So it's already told you that a sulfur basically combines with oxygen to give you sulfur dioxide, and it's already a balanced equation. Now 16 grams of sulfur से कितना mass of oxygen बनेगा? So steps for stoichiometry क्या है? Convert into moles, then from the moles of sulfur calculate the moles of oxygen through by using the equation, and then from the moles of oxygen find the mass of oxygen, right? So these are the steps that we do, right? So moles calculate करते, mass equals mole times molar mass for sulfur. Moles जो है वो find करते, mass कितना है? 16. Molar mass of sulfur is 32. You check that out from the periodic table. 0.5 आ गए. Now from the equation you know that 1 mole of sulfur reacts with 1 mole of oxygen. So you'll also have 0.5 moles of oxygen. कैसे मुझे पता है 1 moles of sulfur react with 1 mole of oxygen? तो अगर 0.5 moles of sulfur होंगे तो x mole of oxygen होंगे. Cross multiply, you're gonna still get 0.5, right? And now you calculate the mass. तो mass calculate करना चाहिए. Mass equals mole times molar mass. अब moles to 0.5 है. अब molar mass क्या लें? 16 लें कि 32 लें? That's the question. Should I multiply it with 16 or should I multiply it with 32? And you guys have to give me the explanation for that. 16 or 32? 32, 32, 32, 32. Yes, 32. Why 32? The reason is it's saying which mass of oxygen gas. We know oxygen gas जो है, that's diatomic O2, right? Oxygen gas is O2, it's diatomic, that means you have 2 atoms of oxygen. So 16 एक का होगा, 16 दूसरे का होगा, you add them together, that gives you 32, right? So that is how we knew that we have to mark, because एक बच्चे ने में से एक सवाल ये सवाल भी पूछा था. So here's your answer, dude. You don't use 16, you use 32, so you get 16 grams. C is the right option. Yeah. C is the right option. Let's circle it out. Boom. Okay. Okay, let's do question 15. Question 15 is good. It's also a titration question. चलो इसके बाद then I'll take your questions. ठीक है? 4 grams of sodium hydroxide NaOH is dissolved. अच्छा, अब ये आपके पास पूरा एक्सपेरिमेंट करवा रहा है आप लोगों से. ठीक है, तो आप एक्सपेरिमेंट कर लेते हैं, जो ये चाहते हैं हम वैसे ही कर लेते हैं. Just give me 1 sec, guys. One sec. Give me 1 sec, let me reply to this dude. Okay. अच्छा जी, तो कह रहा है कि 4 grams of sodium hydroxide is dissolved in 250 centimeter cube of water in a graduated flask. So obviously you are given a concentration. आप इस 4 grams को moles में convert करें, इस पे divide करें, so you are going to get the concentration of the solution of sodium hydroxide, right? Now it's saying कि A 25 centimeter cube sample of this solution is titrated with 0.50 mole per decimeter cube of, this is a beautiful question. So 0.05 moles per decimeter cube of hydrochloric acid के साथ इसने react किया. Let me admit this, guys. Okay. And it's saying which volume of hydrochloric acid is required to exactly neutralize the alkali. आपने volume of hydrochloric acid find करना है. You're given the concentration of hydrochloric acid. So concentration is N is equal to CV, right? So concentration is known. You have to find the volume, but you're also not given the moles. But now we know we could find the moles of we could find the moles of hydrochloric acid by using an equation, right? So we know कि sodium hydroxide, और वैसे ये 1:1 ही है. Sodium hydroxide reacts with hydrochloric acid, gives you H2O plus NaCl, right? So the only way you could go from sodium hydroxide to the moles of HCl is by finding out the moles of sodium hydroxide first, and then you use the moles of sodium hydroxide to find out the moles of HCl. ठीक है? And then from the moles of HCl, you use the moles of HCl and you are given the concentration of HCl, and then you find the volume. अब moles of sodium hydroxide हम कैसे निकालेंगे? You're given 4 grams right here. So 4 grams आप basically find कर सकते हो. 4 moles mass is equal to mole times molar mass. Mass given है 4, moles find करने हैं into molar mass of sodium hydroxide. What is molar mass of sodium hydroxide? I think it's 40. 40 आते हैं. N is equal to 4 divided by 40. That gives me what? 10? 0.1. Not 10. 0.1. 4 divided by 40 is 0.1. अच्छा जी. अब सबसे मज़े की बात क्या है? अब आप लोगों ने क्या करना है? आप लोगों ने गलती यही करनी है कि you're going to say, oh, 0.1 mole of sodium hydroxide, 1 mole of sodium hydroxide reacts with 1 mole of hydrochloric acid, so 0.1 will react with 0.1, so 0.1 आ गया, 0.1 इधर इस्तेमाल करोगे. गलत है. क्यों गलत है? Tell me why it's wrong. Because सिर्फ speed run कर रहे हैं. I'm speed running because I'm imitating you guys. The reason why it's wrong is ये 0.1 moles जो आए हैं सोडियम हाइड्रोक्साइड के, ये 250 सेंटीमीटर क्यूब के लिए थे. These were dissolved in 250 centimeter cube. You are using 25 centimeter cube. You dissolved these many moles in 250 centimeter cube, but you are using 25 centimeter cube, right? So if 0.1 moles of sodium hydroxide are dissolved in 250 centimeter cube for 25 centimeter cube, how many moles would there be? That's x. X is equal to 0.1 times 25 divided by 250. I think you get 0.01. अब आपके पास एक रिएक्शन आ गया. देखो ये तो इसने सोल्यूशन बनाया था. अब इस सोल्यूशन में से उसने सिर्फ 25 सेंटीमीटर क्यूब लिया, तो इसका मतलब है जो मोल्स होंगे 250 सेंटीमीटर क्यूब के लिए, 25 के लिए वो मोल्स कुछ और होंगे, राइट? सो यू गेट 0.01 मोल्स. नाउ यू कुड यूज द इक्वेशन, बिकॉज यही तो आपने 25 सेंटीमीटर क्यूब इस्तेमाल करना है, तो 25 सेंटीमीटर क्यूब के मोल्स हमें चाहिए, 250 के तो नहीं चाहिए ना. So obviously 1 mole of sodium hydroxide reacts with 1 mole of hydrochloric acid. So if you have 0.01, obviously x होंगे, x is equal to 0.01. You got the moles of hydrochloric acid. And from the moles of hydrochloric acid, you can find the volume. You're given the concentration, which is 0.50, and volume equals, obviously you have, what am I doing, into volume. You have to find volume. V is equal to 0.01 divided by 0.50. The explanation is taking longer, right? But obviously you guys have to do this like within 1.5 minute. ये हो जाना चाहिए, क्योंकि कोई बड़ी 1.5 ही मैं ज़्यादा कह रहा हूँ. अगर मैं होता, मैं तो ये obviously मैं अपनी बात नहीं कर रहा, but a normal student should take about 40 seconds to solve this. But leave this at the end, do this. Equation balance कैसे करते हैं इस तरह questions के लिए? Watch acid bases and salts equation. आप अगर मेरे YouTube channel पे जाएंगे, पहली वीडियो होम पे वही लगी हुई है, आपको पता लग जाएगा, ठीक है? So what do we get? 0.01 divided by 0.50. I think this is the most difficult way, मतलब इससे ज़्यादा तो हो ही नहीं सकता. यही सबसे डिफिकल्ट क्वेश्चन है मोल्स एंड स्टोइकियोमेट्री का. सो यू गेट 0.02, क्योंकि टाइट्रेशन है ना और चीज़ें थोड़ी सी आपको टेक्निकल दिया. ओके, अब आप कहेंगे 0.02 तो नहीं है सर ने तो गलत कर दिया. नो, इट्स डेसीमीटर क्यूब में आ गया, बिकॉज यू आर कैरिंग आउट कैलकुलेशंस इन डेसीमीटर. सो टाइम्स इट बाय 1000 in order to convert it into centimeter cube. 20 is the answer. Alright guys, I'm going to tell you something. After I stop this recording, I'll also teach you some ways that you guys can take help from your peers. ओके वो बाद में बताऊंगा, वरना यूट्यूब वाले कहेंगे कि भाई ये बच्चों को क्या पढ़ा रहे हैं. बट ऑब्वियसली बाय हुक और बाय क्रुक नाउ इट्स द टाइम इज अप राइट फॉर योर स्टडीइंग स्टफ. नाउ यू हैव टू गेट अ ग्रेड. Yeah, so I feel like that is it. Yeah, that's it pretty much. If you guys have any particular questions you want me to answer, I'll do that. I'll stop the recording now, or ab your question time starts, right? So ask away, guys. एक हाथ खड़ा कर लें ताकि I know which person has genuinely a question and which person is just joking around. ठीक है? तो ask away, guys.